The gray camp bus, marked with the faded rust-covered letters Camp THUNDERCRACK, rattled along the winding road. It was nearly empty, most kids having arrived the previous week. I pushed my blonde hair from my face and pulled out a detective novel from my knapsack, tuning out the boys and girls joking around. Our school started summer vacation later than others because we used up all our snow days, so we got out a week after other schools. The boy sitting next to me, Tyler, was slim with muscular arms and legs, short black hair, and a t-shirt of his favorite baseball team. At 13, this was my first camp experience. Tyler, who had been to a sports camp the previous summer, tried to make the long ride more bearable. Though he'd never been to Camp THUNDERCRACK, he figured all camps were pretty much the same. "There's nothing here, Tyler," I said. "I'm sure we're almost there, Jason," he replied, aiming his slingshot and firing a paper ball at the girl in front of him. I daydreamed about what camp would be like, determined to have the most fun ever and eager to try everything. The camp brochure had mentioned swimming, archery, and horseback riding. "Why is this trip so dull?" complained a blonde girl who had been hit by Tyler's paper ball and retaliated with a spitball. "Who are you?" Tyler asked. "Jenna," she said. "It's my first time at camp. I hope it lives up to the brochure." As the driver sped down the slope, the camp's totem entrance appeared above the trees, the camp's name spelled out in broken sticks between them. Campers on the bus murmured and glanced toward the front. One boy, however, stayed in his seat, folding a piece of paper. He stood up and tossed a paper airplane at Jenna. "Hey!" Jenna shouted angrily, crumpling the paper airplane and throwing it back. "Watch it!" Suddenly, the driver slammed on the brakes. The bus screeched to a halt in front of the camp, causing us all to jolt forward against the seats. I wished the camp had seat belts like those on school buses. When the driver opened the door, we stepped out into a large open area. The bus was parked beside the totem poles, which supported the camp sign. The surrounding woods looked eerily spooky. Tyler frowned, looking at the deserted cabins. "This place is completely deserted," he said. It felt like we'd stumbled into a horror movie. "Here," the driver grumbled, unloading our luggage with an unnatural strength. I turned to see a couple emerge from the shadows. "Hello," said the young man in a creepy voice. "I'm Counselor Lucas, and this is Counselor Sarah. Welcome to camp." They stood with clipboards and pencils behind their ears, whistles around their necks, and t-shirts with the camp name. They took a silent head count of the new arrivals. "This is camp? It looks like a ghost town," Tyler joked. As I grabbed my gear from the bus, I hurried over to join the other campers who were being lined up by Lucas and Sarah. "I'm glad you all chose to join our group," Lucas announced loudly. "First, we'll take you boys to your cabins. Once you're settled, you can head to the lake. There's more to do here than you can imagine." Lucas lifted his clipboard, glanced at a cabin, and made 2 check marks with his pencil. The cabin perched on a hill, looking somewhat eerie. An odd smile crept across Lucas's face as he turned back to us. "Jason Wells?" I grabbed my belongings and stepped out of line when I heard my name. Lucas pointed to the cabin on the hill. "You and Tyler will be sharing that cabin," he said, marking his clipboard. "Your bunkmates arrived last week. The rest of you follow me." I looked up at the cabin. It needed a fresh coat of paint, and the screens on the door and windows were torn. The number 7 on the front was covered in dust, and the building was shrouded in the shadows of the surrounding trees. As I climbed the hill, I noticed the lake behind the cabin stretching endlessly, its surface shimmering in the dim light. Suddenly, a scream echoed from the direction of the lake. We dropped our gear and ran down the hill. At the lake, we saw a lifeguard pulling a male camper from the dark water. My heart raced as I reached the shore. "What happened?" I asked. "Is he okay?" "I told him not to cross the lake," the lifeguard said, glaring at me. She pointed at the lake. "That house is off limits to campers." I paused on the small green dock at the lake's edge, where rowboats were tied. There it was, a house across the lake. It didn't scare me, but it intrigued me. I wondered what a real detective would do. Why? I asked. Forget it, kid, the lifeguard said. She signaled 2 other counselors. Take him to the camp nurse. She placed a hand on each of our shoulders. Just forget what you saw. Enjoy camp and remember the main rule, stay away from that house. But I was more focused on the old house. As the lifeguard walked away, I turned to Tyler. What's the big deal about an old abandoned house? It looks like we have a mystery on our hands. I love a good mystery. The wind picked up, brushing my face. I'll check on the boy later, the lifeguard said, returning to her station while Tyler and I walked back to the cabin. Oh man, another one, said a voice behind us. We turned to see a boy in a baseball cap approaching. He joined us and said, "Third one this week. If this keeps up, there won't be any boys left at camp." I'm Oliver, from Cabin 7, he introduced himself. I'm Jason, and this is Tyler. We're your new bunkmates, I said, still eyeing the house across the lake. Oliver headed toward the cabin but stopped and turned back. You know the rules, right? They won't let you cross the lake or use the phone, only the nurse's office has one. So, is there anything else we should know? Tyler asked as we walked back to the cabin with Oliver. Lights out is up to us, Oliver said. I've heard the girls are stricter, but I've only managed a few hours of sleep since I got here. When I'm not out playing, I'm reading my comics. We walked through the woods and reached the cabin, where we noticed the light inside moving around. Our 4th bunkmate was clearly reading something by flashlight. I wondered if he might have more information. Oh man, complained a boy from the top bunk, setting his book aside. Are you new here? Get a life, I snapped, though it only made me think of the boy who almost drowned. I covered my mouth and coughed, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. I didn't know how to process the near-drowning incident so soon after arriving at camp. I knew it, the boy grumbled. You're new here, aren't you? That's why. He began to say something but then shifted his words. That's why I don't recognize you. He jumped down from the top bunk with a loud thump. Before I could respond, Oliver spoke up. Mike takes pride in knowing everyone here. At least, he claims to know every camper by their face. If you ask me, he probably doesn't know half the campers he says he does. Impressive, Tyler joked. We rummaged through our duffel bags and pulled out marshmallows, looking forward to roasting them over a campfire. Given our bunkmate's attitude, it was clear he wouldn't be much help with the mystery. I hope we run into Jenna at the campfire, I said. Maybe her counselor knows why that kid almost drowned. Have you checked with their counselors? Probably nothing to learn, Oliver replied. Whoa, you don't know that, I said, opening the door. There might be a connection between the accidents and that house. I'm convinced something strange is going on at this camp. Just then, a bat flew into the cabin. Tyler grabbed a tennis racket and tried to swat it, almost hitting me in the process. Everyone outside the cabin seemed to be laughing. Oliver and Mike settled on their bunks, looking amused. Mike stuffed his face with potato chips, while Oliver sipped from a water bottle. I began to think Camp THUNDERCRACK was unlike any summer camp Tyler had attended. The bat swooped down again, nearly landing on my head. Panicking, I shouted, "Hey!" Hold still, Tyler said, taking aim with the tennis racket. As the bat flew away, Tyler's swing hit me on the head instead. Got it. Ow. I rubbed my head. Try to hit the bat, not me. Open the window while I try to scare it out, I yelled. I rolled up a magazine and tried to swat the bat, but Tyler and I ended up swatting each other while Oliver opened a window. The magazine swished through the air as I chased the bat outside. I have a feeling it's going to be a long summer. Mike flashed a peculiar smile and grabbed a bag of marshmallows as he walked out. He paused and said, "Too bad," then added, "Best not be late." Counselor Lucas doesn't like campers who show up late for the nightly campfire. Mike and Oliver headed out, and Tyler turned to me. "If this weren't so creepy, it would almost be funny. Where do you think that bat came from?" "Chill," I said, shaking off the unsettling start to summer camp. I stomped off the front porch of the cabin. Forget the bat. We need to figure out what caused the near drowning if we're going to solve this mystery. Are you planning to check out that house tomorrow morning?" Tyler asked. We ducked under low-hanging branches to avoid getting smacked in the face. "Don't worry," I replied. "I'm sure there's a logical explanation for everything going on." Eventually, we reached the campfire circle. The campers were seated on logs, grouped with their counselors. Lucas kicked off the evening with the camp song "Michael Row His Boat Ashore," but my mind was elsewhere. I spotted Jenna sitting across from me in the group. Then Lucas gave us an unsettling look. "Would you like to hear a scary camp story?" he asked in a strange voice. The chirping of crickets filled the silence. Lucas stared at us, his gaze shifting from one group to another. "Does anyone know why you're not allowed across the lake?" The campers exchanged glances, remaining silent. I watched Lucas intently, my detective instincts kicking in. This was the camp mystery I wanted to unravel. Lucas took a bite of his roasted marshmallow, heightening the suspense. "The people who died in that house owned the land the camp is built on. Rumor has it, they're buried in the cemetery across the lake." "So what?" Tyler asked. "The camp serves as a reminder that they're no longer alive," Lucas continued. "That's why their ghosts are said to haunt the house every summer, watching over the camp as they did when they were alive." "Ghosts?" Tyler laughed. "No kid in their right mind would believe that." "That's why no one is allowed near the house during their stay," Lucas said, his unsettling smile unwavering. While I agreed with Tyler that ghosts weren't real, I suspected Lucas was concealing something. Lucas went on, "The first counselor who went near that house was never the same. He was hiking alone and ended up near the house. The next morning, camp employees found him, but he couldn't even speak. He was rushed to the camp nurse, but she couldn't find a pulse when he arrived." "How did he die?" I asked. "That's the mystery," Lucas replied. "No one knows if he actually died or not. When the nurse went to examine him, his body was gone." "Yeah, right," Tyler muttered. "How do you know this?" Jenna asked. Lucas's expression turned bizarre. "The counselor who vanished," he said, his skin seeming to melt off his face, "was me." I jumped up from the log and backed away from Lucas. The entire group burst into laughter. I looked over at Lucas, who was now removing his makeup and laughing heartily. "Gotcha! We really had you going, didn't we?" I couldn't help but laugh at myself. I had fallen for one of the oldest camp pranks. It seemed like all the campers who arrived the previous week were in on it. I began to wonder how genuine the bat in the cabin or the drowned boy incident really was. Lucas took a final bite of a marshmallow and stood up. "Everyone head to your bunks," he grinned. "While we don't have an official lights out, I suggest you get ready for a big day tomorrow. It's a tradition we have for first-timers," Counselor Sarah explained. "Right," Lucas said, giving me a pat on the shoulder and smiling at Oliver and Mike. "None of the previous late arrivals were more fun to trick than you. You were an easy target. Your bunkmates were great at getting you in the right frame of mind." The next morning at the lakeshore, I stared at the house across the water, impressed by the prank the counselors had played. I didn't notice the shadow of one of the camp's lifeguards fall over me. "In the water, kid." "Here I go," I said, leaping off the dock and swimming through the dark water. Goosebumps quickly appeared on my arms. As I moved further from the shore, the familiar sensation of being watched returned. I reminded myself that the near drowning was just part of the prank. I couldn't shake the image of the lifeguard pulling the camper from the lake, or Lucas's face melting, and how terrified I had felt, more scared than ever before. Could Lucas have made this lake any colder? Tyler joked, glancing around until he noticed me floating far out in the middle. I hadn't realized how far I had drifted. Tyler's gaze shifted behind me. A green slime began oozing across the lake's surface, creeping up behind me. Floating on my back, I was about to be taken by surprise. "Hey!" Tyler yelled, struggling to stay afloat while pointing at the slime. His voice echoed in my ears. When I saw the slime, I panicked and tried to swim back to the dock. Not knowing what it was, I only focused on getting away. Each time I opened my mouth to scream, water splashed in. Through my blurred vision, I saw Tyler heading towards me. "What's happening?" I gasped, struggling to breathe. "Swim!" Tyler shouted, trying to reach me. "I can't believe this is real. It's freezing!" I exclaimed, feeling the slime clinging to my feet, like walking on ice. Just as I began to sink, I spotted Jenna on the dock. "Got you!" Jenna called, dropping to her knees and reaching out to me. I clambered onto the dock and felt the slime being pulled off me. When I looked back, the slime was retreating towards the house. "No way," I said, my eyes wide with fear. "Look at that," Tyler said, climbing ashore and jogging over to us. "It's heading towards that old house." "That's weird," Jenna muttered. "This can't be another camp tradition, can it? Part of another prank?" "Maybe there's a mystery to solve after all," I said. "We'd better change and head over to that house." "Count me out," Jenna said, her voice distant as if in a trance. I heard a faint humming, like a beehive, but couldn't see one in the nearby trees. "I have better things to do." Tyler and I selected horses from the stables and rode to the far side of the lake. We were surprised to see a camp vehicle parked there. Did Lucas spot us leaving and come after us? The ground shook around the cemetery, causing gravestones to topple and caskets to surface. We watched as a man climbed out of his grave and shuffled toward the cemetery entrance. It was astonishing that such a bag of bones could even stand. His sunken, leathery head had skin peeling off his skull. His jawbone was nearly detached, and his eyes glowed eerily. Bits of flesh hung loosely from his bony frame as he moved stiffly forward. Other figures rose from their graves, most of them female, their dead eyes staring vacantly. It seemed Tyler and I were about to experience the final chapter of the campfire story. Panicked, we scrambled towards the open doors of the house, tripping over our own feet. Inside, I crashed into a pile of junk. A photo album fell onto my head, opening to reveal a picture that read, "Camp THUNDERCRACK Summer Camp for Girls." "What the?" I muttered, shifting my gaze from the photo to the shadow that had fallen over me. To my surprise, it was Counselor Lucas. "Sir, I know we weren't supposed to come here, but after that lake monster, I had to see for myself." "I see you discovered the part of the story I left out last night," Lucas said with one of his unsettling smiles. As he reached up to his neck, he began to peel off his own skin as effortlessly as the zombies outside. That's when I realized Lucas was wearing a mask. "Call me Counselor Janet now," she said with her usual unsettling smile. I didn't die or disappear. The reason I vanished and became nothing more than a ghost story is that the camp owners didn't want the camp going co-ed. So now, any boys who dare come here are turned into girls. Tyler and I stared in horror as Counselor Janet produced a medallion and pressed it against our camp uniforms. Instantly, we felt our hair lengthen to our shoulders, while the hair on our bodies fell away to the dusty floor. I placed a hand on my chest and felt the beginnings of developing chests, just as a beehive-like hum filled both Tyler's and my ears. We slipped into a trance, our minds erasing our former identities. We would soon become permanent campers, even beyond the grave.